Hey there, let's dive right into a struggle that I think is incredibly common, but we often don't talk about it. It's that constant pressure of what other people think. It can honestly feel like a trap, but there's also a path to a sanctuary, a place of incredible safety. So let's start with a question that gets right to the heart of it.
And I mean, really, think about that for a second. Have you ever felt that knot in your stomach, just worrying about being rejected or judged or disapproved of? It's a feeling that can quietly steer our entire lives if we're not careful. And this verse, right here, it basically frames our entire conversation. It lays out two totally different realities. On one side, you've got a snare, a trap that catches us and controls us. And on the other side, there's a sanctuary, a place of genuine safety and real security. So, what does the snare actually look like in day-to-day life? Well, it turns out this fear of man isn't just one single thing. It shows up in our lives in at least four distinct and sometimes pretty subtle ways. First, it can look like insecurity. You know, that deep, nagging need for approval? It's driven by this fear of rejection that's so powerful it ties our very identity to what other people think of us. The question in our heads becomes, if they don't like me, then who am I really? Second, it takes the form of performance. This is the belief that our value comes from what we do, our successes, our talents, our achievements. It's this constant pressure to be impressive, just to feel okay, just to feel secure in who we are.
Now, what's really interesting about this next one is how inward it is. Fear can also show up as this intense self-focus, where our own inner critic becomes the loudest, most powerful voice in our lives. We get trapped not by what others think, but by our own harsh self-judgments. And finally, there's the fear of what you could call people power. This is that gut-level fear of what others can actually do to you, physically or emotionally. What if they abandon you? What if they hurt you? It's that feeling that other people hold way, way too much power over your life and your well-being. So we have these four faces of fear, right? Insecurity, performance, self-focus, and people power. But why are they so good at trapping us? Turns out they all point back to one single foundational issue. Let's just pause on that for a second. What do you think really connects all these different anxieties about other people? What's the engine that's actually driving the trap?
And here's the crucial point. It's an issue of worship. We give power to whatever we fear. So when we fear people, their opinions, their actions, their approval, we are, in a sense, giving them an authority in our lives that they were never ever meant to have. It's a spiritual issue, not just an emotional one. But if the snare is built on misplaced worship, then the sanctuary, that place of safety, it must be built on rightly placed worship. This is the alternative path. This is the one that actually leads to freedom. And wow, this just illustrates the difference so clearly. Look at this contrast. People, sure, they can influence our circumstances, but God determines our core identity. They might be able to hurt our bodies, but God secures our soul for eternity. They can withdraw their love or abandon us, but God promises He will never, ever leave and will always take us in. I mean, the power comparison isn't even close. And all of this is possible because of who God is. He's not some distant idea. He's our refuge and strength. He's our creator. He's our Father who will never leave. And, so important for this conversation, He is our helper and our defender. That is an unshakable foundation for a life free from the fear of man. Okay, so we understand the problem. We see the alternative foundation. But how do we bridge that gap? How do we practically walk out of the snare and into the sanctuary? Well, let's look at the remedies. Here are four key principles for walking in freedom, and you'll see how each one is a direct answer to the fears we've been talking about. It all starts with fearing the Lord, which is really the only safe fear. Then, knowing your true identity in Christ, embracing the cross, and actively renewing your mind with what is true. You know, the writer A.W. Tozer put it this way, and it's just a stunning idea. He said, when we stop trying to manage our own reputation, when we stop trying to defend ourselves from what people might do or say, we open ourselves up to having God Himself as our defender. And I mean, what defender could possibly be better than that? So let's really unpack what this new identity actually means. First, you are chosen. Not because of your performance or because you earned approval from somebody, but because you were chosen by God. That is a foundation that absolutely cannot be shaken by someone's opinion. Second, your new identity says you are complete in Christ. You don't need another person's validation to be whole. You already are. This speaks directly to that feeling of insecurity we were talking about earlier. And finally, it says you are eternally loved and secure. This is the ultimate answer to the fear of rejection and the fear of abandonment. Nothing and no one can ever separate you from this love.
So, knowing all this is one thing, right? But actually living it out is a whole other thing. So let's get really practical. How do we walk out of this snare on a daily basis?
Here's a simple, repeatable plan. First, just start noticing. Identify where this fear is showing up in your life. Second, when you hear the lies of fear in your head, intentionally replace them with what you know is true about God and who you are in Him. Third, take small steps of faith, choosing to obey God rather than your fear. And finally, actively hand over your anxieties to God. He can handle them.
So what does this all come down to? It's this simple, yet completely life-changing truth. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to live in fear of what people might think or do. Your defender is God Himself. And that leaves us with a final question to really think about. The snare is real, but the sanctuary is just as real. So as you go about your day, think about this. In the snare of what others think, or in the sanctuary of trusting God, where are you going to find your safety?